Two shy twin boys whose father couldn't afford proper clothes, let alone voice lessons, pushed onto a middle school talent show stage just to fill time before the real acts. The audience was already snickering before they even opened their mouths. But when those first notes rang out, something miraculous happened. The laughter died, the whispers stopped, and suddenly, everyone in that packed auditorium realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. What started as a desperate father's attempt to boost his son's confidence became the moment that changed 3 lives forever. Before we dive into this incredible story of hidden talent, family bonds, and the power of believing in your loved ones, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the most beautiful voices come from the most unexpected places. Now let me tell you what really happened that night. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn. Wind whipped through the cracked windows of the old Honda Civic as it pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Middle School. The car sputtered and wheezed before finally giving up with a mechanical sigh that seemed to echo the exhaustion of its driver. Dennis Carter turned off the engine and sat for a moment, his calloused hands still gripping the steering wheel as he stared at the brightly lit school building ahead. Inside that building, in less than an hour, his 2 sons would step onto a stage in front of hundreds of people. And Dennis knew exactly what those people expected to see. 2 awkward, poorly dressed boys from the wrong side of town, there to provide comic relief before the real talent took the stage. What they didn't expect was what Dennis had been, hearing through thin apartment walls for months. Voices that could make grown men weep and skeptics believe in something greater than themselves. "Dad, are you okay?" The voice came from the back seat, soft and uncertain. Lucas Carter, 12 years old and exactly 3 minutes older than his twin brother, leaned forward with concern etched across his freckled face. His hand rested protectively on his brother's shoulder, a gesture Dennis had noticed becoming more frequent as the boys got older and the world got crueler. "I'm fine, buddy," Dennis replied, though his voice carried the weight of a man who hadn't been fine in a very long time. He turned to look at his sons in the rearview mirror. Lucas, the slightly taller of the 2, wore a button-down shirt that Dennis had found at Goodwill for $3. It was clean and pressed, but it hung loose on his thin frame, and the sleeves were just a touch too short. Next to him sat Marcus, quieter and more introspective, wearing an identical shirt that somehow looked even more oversized on his smaller build. They were beautiful boys, Dennis thought. They had their mother's gentle eyes and her musical soul, though they'd inherited his stubborn chin and unruly dark hair that refused to lay flat no matter how much water he used. Looking at them now, dressed in their thrift store finest, Dennis felt the familiar ache in his chest, the same ache that had been his constant companion since Sarah's accident 3 years ago. "The talent show starts in 20 minutes, Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible even in the confines of the small car. Where Lucas was protective and outgoing, Marcus had always been the observer, the one who felt everything deeply but shared it carefully. "Do you think people will actually listen to us?" Dennis turned around fully to face his sons, seeing past their nervous smiles to the hope and fear warring in their eyes. These weren't just any boys about to perform at a school talent show. These were his boys. 2 kids who had been through more in their short lives than most adults could handle. They'd lost their mother, moved 3 times in 2 years as Dennis struggled to find steady work, and endured the whispered comments and pitying looks from neighbors who saw them as the poor Carter boys. But Dennis had a secret that the audience tonight didn't know. He'd been listening to his sons sing together since they were old enough to hum along to the radio. It had started innocently enough, Lullabies Sarah used to sing to them, hummed while they did homework or washed dishes, but over the years, especially since Sarah's death, their voices had become something extraordinary. They sang to comfort each other during thunderstorms, to fill the silence of their empty apartment, to make sense of a world that had taken their mother too soon. The school's music teacher, Mrs. Phillips, had heard them singing in the hallway one day and practically begged Dennis to let them participate in the talent show. "They have a gift," she told him over the phone, "the kind of gift that comes along once in a generation. But they need confidence, Mr. Carter. They need to know that the world wants to hear what they have to offer." What Mrs. Phillips didn't say, but Dennis understood, was that the boys had been signed up as a last-minute addition to fill time. The real acts, the popular kids with private music lessons and expensive instruments, would close the show. Lucas and Marcus were there to warm up the crowd, to give the audience something to politely applaud before the main event. Dennis had almost said no. The thought of his sensitive, shy boys facing a crowd of their peers, many of whom had already branded them as outsiders, made his protective instincts flare. But then he'd seen something in their eyes when he'd mentioned the opportunity, a spark of excitement mixed with terror, the look of two boys who desperately wanted to be heard but were afraid no one would listen. "You know what, boys?" Dennis said, unbuckling his seatbelt and turning to face them fully. "I think tonight is going to surprise a lot of people, including you two." Lucas tilted his head, a habit he'd inherited from his mother. "What do you mean?" Dennis smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in weeks. "I mean that sometimes the world needs to be reminded that the most beautiful things come from the most unexpected places. And tonight, you two are going to remind them." He watched as his sons exchanged one of their wordless twin conversations. A quick glance that communicated more than most people managed in entire conversations. Marcus nodded slightly, and Lucas straightened his shoulders. "Okay, Dad," Lucas said, his voice stronger now. "Let's go show them what the Carter boys can do." As they walked toward the school, Dennis felt his phone buzz with a text message. Rent was due in 3 days, and he was $40 short. The car needed new brakes, the electricity bill was overdue, but for the next hour, none of that mattered. Tonight was about his sons and the gift they carried in their voices, a gift that was about to transform not just their lives, but the lives of everyone who heard them sing. The school hallway buzzed with the pre-show energy of excited families and nervous performers. Dennis could hear the sound check from the auditorium, the screech of microphones being adjusted, and the thump of speakers being tested. His sons walked beside him, their steps synchronized in the way that only twins could manage, their voices already warming up with soft, unconscious harmonies. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to teach an entire auditorium that sometimes the most powerful performances come not from perfect technique or expensive training, but from hearts that have learned to find beauty in struggle and hope in hardship. Tonight, the Carter boys would prove that talent doesn't require a trust fund, and that the most moving voices often belong to those who have the most to say. The fluorescent lights of Riverside Middle School's hallway buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everyone look slightly pale and tired. Dennis had always hated places like this, institutional buildings that smelled of industrial disinfectant and carried the weight of 1,000 small humiliations. As they walked toward the auditorium, he couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between his sons and the other families bustling around them. To his left, a woman in a pristine white blazer adjusted her daughter's sequined dress while discussing vocal warm-ups with what was clearly a private voice coach. The girl, probably around Lucas and Marcus's age, practiced scales with the confidence of someone who had never doubted that the world wanted to hear her sing. Her parents flanked her like a professional entourage, one carrying a professional grade microphone, the other reviewing what appeared to be sheet music printed on expensive paper. "Remember, Sophia," the mother was saying, her manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. Projection is key. Mrs. Rodriguez said the acoustics in this auditorium are challenging, so really open up that diaphragm during the bridge. Dennis felt Marcus's hand slip into his, a gesture his son had been making since he was small, whenever the world felt too big or too overwhelming. At 12, Marcus was getting too old for hand-holding, but Dennis squeezed back anyway. Some comforts were worth holding on to, especially when everything else felt uncertain. They passed another family cluster where a boy, Lucas's age, was warming up on an actual violin, not the half-size rental instrument from the school's music program, but a gleaming professional instrument that probably cost more than Dennis made in 3 months. The boy's father, wearing a suit that fit perfectly and shoes that had never seen a scuff mark, was timing the performance with a gold watch. 2 minutes and 43 seconds, the father announced. Perfect. That leaves you 17 seconds for applause and transition. Remember what your instructor said about stage presence. Eye contact with the back row, shoulders back, and don't forget to smile during the modulation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Lucas squeezed closer to Dennis's other side, and Dennis could feel the tension radiating from both his sons. This wasn't just a school talent show. This was a showcase of privilege, a display of all the opportunities that money could buy and all the advantages that came with having parents who understood how to navigate systems like this. The hallway was a parade of expensive instruments, professional coaching, and designer outfits. There were parents with video cameras that cost more than Dennis's monthly rent, discussing lighting angles and optimal recording positions. There were siblings in matching outfits that had clearly been purchased specifically for this event, not borrowed from the church donation box like the blazer Dennis wore. The same blazer he'd worn to job interviews, parent-teacher conferences, and Sarah's funeral. "Dad," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible above the controlled chaos around them, "maybe we shouldn't do this." Dennis stopped walking and knelt down to his son's level, right there in the middle of the hallway, ignoring the curious glances from other families. Lucas and Marcus stood before him, 2 boys who had learned too young that the world wasn't always kind to people like them. People who shopped at thrift stores and clipped coupons and sometimes ate cereal for dinner because it was all they could afford. "You know what I see when I look around here?" Dennis asked, keeping his voice low and steady. "I see a lot of expensive equipment and fancy clothes, but you know what I don't see?" The boys shook their heads. "I don't see anybody who's been through what you two have been through. I don't see anybody who learned to harmonize by singing each other to sleep when the storms got too loud, or when missing mom made it hard to breathe. I don't see anybody who figured out how to make music out of the hardest parts of life." A family walked past them, another perfectly coordinated unit, with a girl carrying a guitar case covered in competition stickers and achievement ribbons. The parents were deep in conversation about maximizing exposure and building her brand. The girl herself looked miserable, her shoulders hunched under the weight of expectations that seemed to follow her like a heavy backpack. "See that?" Dennis nodded toward the retreating family. "That girl's probably really talented, but I bet she's never had to sing to make herself feel better. I bet she's never had to find harmony in the middle of chaos. You boys have something that can't be bought or taught. You have heart, you have story, and you have each other." Marcus looked up at his father with those serious brown eyes that were so much like Sarah's. "But what if we mess up? What if people laugh?" "Then they laugh," Dennis said simply. "But you know what? Some of the most beautiful things in this world started with people laughing. Your mom used to say that laughter and tears come from the same place. They're both about feeling something so big that it has to come out somehow." Lucas, ever the protector, straightened his shoulders. "We're not going to mess up," he said with more confidence than Dennis had heard from him in months. "Are we, Marcus?" Marcus nodded, and Dennis saw something shift in his younger son's posture. The fear was still there, but it was balanced now by something else. Determination, maybe, or just the simple courage that comes from knowing someone believes in you completely. They resumed walking toward the auditorium, and Dennis noticed that his son's steps had changed. They still walked in sync, but there was purpose in their movement now, a quiet dignity that no amount of money could buy. As they passed another family, this one clustered around a boy practicing what sounded like an opera piece. Marcus began to hum softly under his breath, just a simple melody, nothing fancy or trained, but Lucas immediately joined in with a harmony line that made the hair on Dennis's arms stand up. Other people in the hallway began to turn their heads, not mockingly, but with genuine curiosity. The sound was so pure, so unforced, that it cut through the practiced chatter and competitive energy like a warm breeze through an air-conditioned room. Mrs. Phillips appeared at Dennis's elbow, as if summoned by the boys humming. "There they are," she said with a smile that reached her eyes. "Are you boys ready to show everyone what real music sounds like?" Dennis looked at his sons, really looked at them. They were still wearing their thrift store shirts and their second-hand shoes. Their hair was still unruly, and they still looked like what they were. Two boys from a struggling family who had learned to find beauty in the midst of hardship. But something had changed in the few minutes since they'd entered the school. They looked ready. "We're ready, Mrs. Phillips," Lucas said, and Marcus nodded in agreement. As they approached the auditorium doors, Dennis could hear the warm-up music. From inside, scales and arpeggios, the sound of performers getting ready to compete. But his sons weren't competitors tonight. They were storytellers, and they had a story worth telling. The auditorium doors opened with a heavy whoosh, releasing a wave of sound that hit Dennis like a physical force. Inside, Riverside Middle School's auditorium was a chaos of controlled impreparation. The stage lights blazed white-hot, casting dramatic shadows across red velvet curtains that had seen better decades. In the audience, parents jockeyed for the best seats, their phones already out and recording, transforming what should have been a simple school event into something that felt more like a high-stakes competition. Dennis guided his sons to 3 empty seats in the back corner, not by choice, but because those were the only seats left. From here, they had a perfect view of the social hierarchy playing out before them. The front rows were occupied by families who clearly belonged to the school's inner circle. PTA presidents, board members, and parents whose last names appeared on the gymnasium walls as major donors. Their designer handbags rested confidently on the armrests, and their conversations carried the easy confidence of people who had never doubted their place in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Riverside Middle School's annual talent showcase. The voice boomed from the stage speakers, belonging to Principal Martinez, a thin man in an ill-fitting suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Tonight, we celebrate the incredible talents of our students. Please remember to silence your phones and hold your applause until the end of each performance. Dennis watched as his sons sank lower in their seats, suddenly small again in the face of this overwhelming production. The stage looked enormous from back here, the lights harsh and unforgiving. He could see Lucas's hands trembling slightly as he gripped the program, and Marcus had gone completely silent, his eyes wide as he took in the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. The first performer took the stage, Sophia, the girl they'd seen in the hallway with her professional voice coach. She launched into a Broadway number with the kind of polished confidence that comes from years of expensive training. Her voice was technically perfect, each note precisely placed, each gesture choreographed. The audience applauded enthusiastically, and Dennis could hear parents whispering appreciatively about her natural talent and bright future. But as Dennis watched, he noticed something that the audience seemed to miss. For all her technical skill, Sophia's performance felt hollow, like a beautiful shell with nothing inside. She hit every note perfectly, but there was no heart in it. No story being told beyond the one that had been rehearsed and refined until all the genuine emotion had been polished away. The performances continued in a parade of privilege and preparation. A boy played violin with mechanical precision. A girl performed a dance routine that looked like it had been lifted from a competition video. Each act was met with enthusiastic applause from parents who seemed more interested in recording perfect videos than actually watching their own children perform. "Dad," Marcus whispered, his voice so quiet Dennis had to lean in to hear him. "What if we don't sound like them?" Dennis looked at his youngest son, seeing the fear and self-doubt that had been building since they'd walked into the school. Marcus had always been the more sensitive of the twins, the one who felt the weight of other people's expectations most keenly. Right now, he looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. "You don't sound like them," Dennis said, and he watched Marcus's face fall. "You sound like something better. You sound like yourselves." But Dennis could see that his words weren't enough. The performance environment was overwhelming his sons, making them shrink back into themselves just when they needed to step forward. He made a decision that would later seem like the most natural thing in the world, but in that moment felt like jumping off a cliff. "Come with me," he said, standing up abruptly. "Where are we going?" Lucas asked, alarmed. "Backstage. We need to remember who we are before we get up there." They slipped out of their seats and made their way through the lobby toward the stage entrance. The backstage area was a flurry of nervous energy, kids warming up, parents giving last-minute pep talks, teachers trying to maintain some semblance of order. Mrs. Phillips spotted them immediately and hurried over. "There you are. The boys are on in about 15 minutes. Are you ready?" Dennis looked at his sons, who both appeared to be on the verge of panic. "Actually, we need a few minutes alone, if that's okay." Mrs. Phillips nodded understandingly. "Use the music room down the hall. It'll be quiet there." The music room was a small, cramped space filled with mismatched chairs and music stands. Posters of famous composers lined the walls, and a battered upright piano sat in one corner. Dennis closed the door behind them, shutting out the chaos of the backstage area. "Sit down, boys," he said gently. Lucas and Marcus perched on the edge of two plastic chairs, looking lost and small. Dennis knelt in front of them the same way he had in the hallway and took their hands in his. "I want you to close your eyes," he said. "Both of you." They obeyed, though Lucas peeked one eye open skeptically. "Now I want you to remember last Tuesday night. Do you remember what happened?" Marcus's brow furrowed in concentration. "It was raining really hard." "That's right. And what were you two doing?" "We were in our room," Lucas said slowly. "The power went out. And then we were scared," Marcus whispered. "The thunder was really loud and it reminded us of the night Mom died," Lucas finished. Dennis squeezed their hands gently. "And what did you do when you got scared?" We sang," Marcus said, his voice barely audible. "We sang Mom's lullaby." "That's right, and how did it sound?" Lucas opened his eyes, looking at his father with sudden understanding. "It sounded like Mom was there with us." "Exactly. You didn't think about technique or projection or hitting the right notes. You just sang from your hearts, and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. That's what's special about you two. You don't perform music, you live it." Dennis stood up and walked over to the old piano. He pressed middle C, and the note rang out, slightly out of tune but warm and inviting. "That piano has probably been here for 20 years, he said. "It's not perfect. The keys stick sometimes, and it hasn't been tuned in months. But it still makes music, real music, the kind that moves people not because it's perfect, but because it's honest." He played a simple chord progression, nothing fancy, just the opening to the lullaby Sarah used to sing to the boys when they were small. Marcus immediately began to hum along, his voice soft and uncertain at first, then growing stronger. Lucas joined in, finding the harmony line instinctively, the way he always did. The sound filled the small room, and Dennis felt goosebumps rise on his arms. This was it. This was what Mrs. Phillips had heard that day in the hallway. This was what would stop the audience cold in just a few minutes. Not technical perfection, but raw, honest emotion translated into melody. "This is who you are," Dennis said as the last notes faded away. "This is what you have to offer the world. Not a polished performance, but something real, something true." Marcus looked up at his father with tears in his eyes. "But what if they don't understand?" Dennis smiled, remembering Sarah's words from years ago when he'd been nervous about his first job interview after her diagnosis. "Then we teach them how to listen." A soft knock on the door interrupted them. Mrs. Phillips poked her head in, her face glowing with excitement. "Boys, you're on in 2 minutes. Are you ready?" Lucas and Marcus looked at each other, then at their father. The fear was still there, but it was balanced now by something else, a quiet confidence that came from remembering who they were and what they had to offer. "We're ready," Lucas said, and for the first time all evening, Dennis believed him. As they walked back toward the stage, Dennis could hear the current performer finishing up, another technically perfect but emotionally vacant rendition of a popular song. The audience applauded politely, already reaching for their phones to check messages. They had no idea what was about to hit them. The stage wings were a maze of black curtains and electrical cables, dimly lit by the glow of the stage lights bleeding through the gaps. Dennis could feel the heat radiating from the powerful bulbs overhead, and the air smelled of dust and old fabric and the peculiar electricity of live performance. His sons stood beside him, no longer the panicked boys who had nearly fled the auditorium 20 minutes earlier, but something else entirely. 2 young performers who had remembered what it meant to sing with their souls instead of their technique. "Next up," Principal Martinez's voice echoed from the stage, "we have Lucas and Marcus Carter performing an original arrangement." Dennis felt his chest tighten. Original arrangement. That made it sound so formal, so planned. The truth was simpler and more complex than that. His boys were about to share a piece of their hearts with a room full of strangers, and they were going to do it in the only way they knew how, honestly. Mrs. Phillips appeared beside them, her face flushed with excitement and something that looked like barely contained anticipation. "Boys, you're going to be incredible out there. I can feel it." She'd been teaching music at Riverside Middle School for 8 years, and in all that time, she'd never heard anything quite like what she'd witnessed from Lucas and Marcus. Most of her students approach music like a puzzle to be solved. They learned the notes, practiced the timing, memorized the words. But these 2 boys understood something that couldn't be taught. They understood that music was a language, and they were fluent in ways that had nothing to do with formal training. "Mrs. Phillips," Marcus said quietly, his voice steadier than it had been all evening, "thank you for believing in us." The teacher knelt down to their level, her eyes bright, with unshed tears. "Thank you for reminding me why I became a music teacher in the first place. Sometimes we get so caught up in competitions and perfect performances that we forget music is supposed to heal people." Dennis watched this exchange with a growing sense of wonder. His sons weren't just about to perform. They were about to connect. And Mrs. Phillips wasn't just their teacher, she was their champion, someone who had recognized their gift and fought to give them this platform. "Can I tell you boys something?" Mrs. Phillips continued. "I've been teaching for 8 years, and I've seen hundreds of talented students. Some of them went on to prestigious music programs, some won state competitions, some even got recording in contracts, but none of them, not one, had what you 2 have." "What's that?" Lucas asked. "You have the ability to make people feel less alone in the world. That's the rarest gift a musician can have." From the stage, they could hear polite applause as the previous performer finished. Dennis felt his pulse quicken. This was it. The moment that would either validate everything he'd believed about his sons or confirm his worst fears about putting them in a position to be hurt. But as he looked at Lucas and Marcus, he realized his fears were misplaced. These weren't the same boys who had sat in the car an hour ago, worried about being laughed at. These were young men who had reconnected with their purpose, who understood that they weren't performing for applause or approval, but to share something precious and authentic. "Dad," Lucas said, his voice carrying a new note of maturity that Dennis had never heard before. "No matter what happens out there, thank you for bringing us tonight." "Thank you for making us remember Mom's song," Marcus added. Dennis felt his throat tighten with emotion. Sarah's lullaby, the one she'd hummed to them when they were babies, the one they'd sung to each other through thunderstorms and lonely nights, the one that had become their musical foundation without any of them consciously realizing it. "She would be so proud of you both," Dennis managed to say. The stage lights shifted, and they could hear Principal Martinez's voice again. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lucas and Marcus Carter." Mrs. Phillips squeezed both boys' shoulders. "Remember, sing for the person in the back row who needs to hear what you have to say. There's always someone who needs exactly what you're offering." Dennis watched his sons walk onto that stage, and for a moment, time seemed to slow down. He could see everything with perfect clarity, the way Lucas straightened his shoulders and took his place at center stage, the way Marcus found his position slightly to the left, the way they automatically checked each other's positions with the wordless communication that only twins possess. But more than that, he could see the audience's reaction to their entrance. There was a shift in the energy of the room, subtle but unmistakable. The polite chatter that had accompanied the previous performers died away. Parents who had been checking their phones looked up. Even the most cynical audience members, the teenagers who'd been forced to attend by their parents, stopped their whispering and paid attention. It wasn't because Lucas and Marcus looked impressive. If anything, they looked smaller on that big stage, their thrift store shirts and nervous postures making them seem vulnerable and young. But there was something in their bearing, something in the way they held themselves, that commanded attention without demanding it. Dennis crept to the edge of the stage wing where he could see both his sons and the audience. What he saw in that packed auditorium made his breath catch in his throat. Row after row of faces, all turned toward the stage with an expectancy that seemed almost electric. These people had no idea what they were about to witness, but somehow, on some unconscious level, they knew they were about to experience something different. In the third row, he spotted a woman who looked to be about his age, sitting with what appeared to be her own teenage daughter. The mother's face was tired, marked by the kind of exhaustion that came from working multiple jobs and shouldering responsibilities alone. She looked like she'd rather be anywhere else until she saw Lucas and Marcus. Something in her expression, he softened, and Dennis realized she recognized something in his boys, some reflection of her own struggles and hopes. Near the back, an elderly man sat with his arms crossed, clearly dragged to the event by family members. He wore the skeptical expression of someone who had seen too many mediocre school performances and expected nothing different tonight. But as Lucas and Marcus took their positions, even his posture began to change. And scattered throughout the audience, Dennis spotted other faces that told similar stories. Single parents, grandparents, siblings who looked like they carried burdens too heavy for their age. People who understood struggle, who knew what it meant to keep going when everything felt impossible. These were the people Mrs. Phillips had been talking about, the ones who needed to hear what his sons had to offer. Not the front row families with their professional cameras and designer clothes, but the ones in the middle and back rows who had come tonight hoping for a moment of beauty in lives that didn't always provide much of that. Marcus stepped forward, to the microphone, and the auditorium fell completely silent. Not the polite quiet that had accompanied the other performances, but something deeper. The kind of silence that comes when people instinctively know they're about to witness something important. "This song," Marcus said, his voice soft but clear enough to reach every corner of the auditorium, "is for our mom, who taught us that music isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest." He stepped back, and Lucas moved forward. "And it's for anyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong somewhere, or like their voice didn't matter. Because it does matter. Every voice matters." Dennis felt tears spring to his eyes. These weren't the words they'd rehearsed. They weren't words at all, really, but something deeper. This was his son's hearts, speaking directly to the hearts of everyone in that room. The boys looked at each other, nodded once, and opened their mouths to sing, and that's when everything changed. The first note that came from Marcus's lips was barely more than a whisper, but it carried across the auditorium, like a prayer finding its way to heaven. It wasn't the opening note of a performance. It was the beginning of a conversation, an invitation for everyone in that room to lean in and listen to something they'd never heard before. Lucas joined on the second measure, his voice weaving around his brothers like two streams converging into a single river. There was no accompaniment, no backing track, no instrumental support, just two 12-year-old boys and the song their mother had hummed to them in a lifetime that felt both yesterday and forever ago. Dennis gripped the edge of the stage curtain, watching as something magical began to unfold. In the front row, he saw Sophia's mother, the same woman who had been coaching her daughter on projection and technique, slowly lean forward in her seat, her perfectly manicured hand pressed to her chest. Her expression had shifted from polite attention to something approaching wonder. The song was simple, built on a melody that Sarah had created during late-night feedings and teething episodes, when lullabies needed to work miracles and mothers needed to believe in magic. But in Lucas and Marcus's voices, that simple melody became something transcendent. Their harmonies weren't perfect in any technical sense. Lucas's voice occasionally cracked with the uncertainty of adolescence, and Marcus sometimes breathed in places that would make a vocal coach wince. But their imperfections only made the performance more honest, more human, more real. "Sleep now, my darling, the world can wait," Marcus sang, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Tomorrow will bring what tomorrow will bring, but tonight you are safe, tonight you are loved, tonight you can rest in the songs that we sing." The words were Sarah's, written during one of her increasingly frequent hospital stays, when she'd known that her time with her boys was measured in months rather than years. She'd made Dennis promise to teach them the song, to help them understand that her love would live on in the melodies she left behind. Lucas took the second verse, his voice climbing slightly higher than his brother's, creating a harmony that seemed to lift the entire auditorium. "When the storms come calling and the night feels long, when you're scared and small and nothing feels right, remember this moment, remember this song, remember the love that will hold you tight." Dennis found himself scanning the audience, watching, as face after face began to change. The skeptical elderly man near the back had uncrossed his arms and was sitting forward, his weathered face soft with something that looked like recognition. 3 rows from the front, a teenage girl who had been scrolling through her phone at the beginning of the evening was now staring at the stage with tears streaming down her cheeks. But it was the woman Dennis had noticed earlier, the tired-looking mother sitting with her teenage daughter, whose reaction hit him the hardest. She was crying openly now, not trying to hide her tears or apologize for them. Her daughter had moved closer to her, their heads almost touching as they listened to Lucas and Marcus pour their hearts out on that stage. The song built slowly, each verse adding layers of meaning and emotion. This wasn't a performance designed to showcase range or technical skill. It was a testimony, a sharing of the deepest truth two young boys had ever learned, that love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes form, becoming memory and melody and the courage to keep singing, even when your heart is broken. And when you're grown and far from home. Both boys sang together now, their voices intertwining in a harmony that seemed to come from somewhere beyond their years. And you have little ones of your own. Sing them this song. Let them know that love is the strongest thing we can grow. Dennis felt his own tears flowing freely now, not just for the beauty of what his sons were creating, but for the recognition of how far they'd all come. 3 years ago, in the immediate aftermath of Sarah's death, he'd wondered if any of them would ever feel whole again. The boys had retreated into themselves, speaking in whispers when they spoke at all, and Dennis had thrown himself into work and worry, trying to hold their small family together through sheer force of will. But somehow, without any of them consciously planning it, music had become their bridge back to each other. It had started with humming while they did dishes, progressed to singing in the car during their numerous moves, and eventually evolved into the evening harmonies that had become as much a part of their routine as dinner and homework. The boys had never performed for anyone outside their apartment walls. They'd never sought an audience or imagined that their private moments of musical healing could touch other people's hearts. But Mrs. Phillips had heard something in their hallway, humming that she recognized as extraordinary, and she'd fought to give them this platform. Now, watching his sons transform that auditorium full of strangers into something that felt like family, Dennis understood what she'd seen. This wasn't just talent, it was ministry. His boys weren't just singing, they were healing. Not just themselves, but everyone who needed to remember that they weren't alone in their struggles. The song was approaching its end, but the effect on the audience was just beginning. Dennis could see it in the way people were leaning toward each other, in the way barriers seemed to be dissolving row by row. The front row families with their expensive clothes were wiping away tears, just like the working parents in the back. The teenagers who had come reluctantly were as moved as their grandparents. The song was revealing a truth that transcended economic status and social position. Everyone in that room had experienced loss. Everyone had needed comfort. Everyone had sung or been sung to in moments when words weren't enough. As the final verse began, something extraordinary happened. The woman Dennis had been watching, the tired mother who had been crying, began to mouth the words along with Lucas and Marcus. She didn't know Sarah's lullaby, had never heard it before tonight, but somehow the melody had become familiar. The words universal enough that they felt like something she'd always known, and she wasn't the only one. Throughout the auditorium, people were swaying slightly, unconsciously moving to the rhythm of a song that felt both brand new and ancient. Some were humming along softly, adding their voices to the Carter Boys' harmonies in a way that turned the performance into something communal, something shared. Dennis realized that his sons had accomplished something that went far beyond winning a talent show or impressing an audience. They had created a moment of genuine human connection in a world that often felt fractured and isolated. They had reminded everyone in that room that music, at its core, isn't about perfection or competition. It's about recognizing the shared experiences that make us human. The final notes of the lullaby hung in the air like a blessing, and for a long moment, the auditorium was completely silent. Not the polite quiet that follows a good performance, but the sacred silence that comes after witnessing something that changes you. Then, slowly, the applause began. The applause started with a single pair of hands. The tired mother, in the third row, clapping slowly, deliberately, as if each clap were a word in a language she'd just learned to speak. Then, her teenage daughter joined in. Then, the elderly man who had entered skeptical and found himself transformed. Within seconds, The entire auditorium was on its feet. But this wasn't the polite, obligatory standing ovation that punctuated most school performances. This was something else entirely. This was recognition. This was gratitude. This was a room full of people acknowledging that they had just witnessed something that would stay with them long after they left the school parking lot. Dennis watched from the wings as Lucas and Marcus stood center stage, not quite sure what to do with the thunderous response. They weren't seasoned performers who knew how to graciously accept acclaim. They were 12-year-old boys who had just shared the most intimate part of their lives with a room full of strangers. And now those strangers were giving them something back. Validation that their pain had meaning, that their mother's lullaby had the power to heal hearts beyond their own. But as Dennis watched his sons navigate this moment of triumph, he began to notice something that made his chest tighten. With a mixture of pride and protectiveness, the applause wasn't stopping. If anything, it was growing louder, more intense, and with it came something that Dennis hadn't expected: the weight of sudden recognition. In the front row, he saw parents pulling out their phones, not just to record the moment, but to capture the boys themselves. Camera flashes began popping throughout the auditorium as people tried to document what they'd just witnessed. Dennis could see the exact moment when Lucas and Marcus realized they were no longer just two boys sharing a song. They had become something else, something that people wanted to possess, to claim, to make their own. Mrs. Phillips appeared beside Dennis, her face glowing with excitement and something that looked like vindication. "I knew it," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the continuing applause. "I knew they had something special, but this... Dennis, do you understand what just happened? Your boys didn't just perform, they connected with every single person in this room. That's not talent, that's a gift, a real gift." Dennis nodded, but he was watching his sons' faces, seeing the way their initial joy was beginning to shift into something more complicated. Marcus, always the more sensitive of the two, was starting to look overwhelmed by the intensity of the response. His eyes were searching the crowd, no longer seeing individual faces, but a sea of attention that felt too big, too bright, too much. Lucas, ever protective of his brother, moved slightly closer to Marcus, their shoulders touching in, a gesture of mutual support that Dennis recognized from their earliest years. Even in this moment of triumph, they were taking care of each other, creating a small bubble of familiar safety in the midst of overwhelming response. The applause finally began to die down, but as it did, something else started. Voices calling out from the audience. "Encore!" someone shouted from the back row. "More!" called another voice. "Sing something else!" The requests began multiplying, and Dennis could see panic flickering across his sons' faces. They hadn't prepared an encore. They hadn't expected this level of response. They had come here to share their mother's lullaby, to honor Mrs. Phillips' belief in them, to prove to themselves that their voices mattered. They hadn't prepared for the possibility that their moment of private healing would become a public phenomenon. Principal Martinez stepped onto the stage, his microphone crackling to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it one more time for Lucas and Marcus Carter." The applause erupted again, but Dennis could see the principal's discomfort. This wasn't how school talent shows were supposed to go. There was supposed to be polite applause, a brief acknowledgement, and then a smooth transition to the next act. But the energy in the room had shifted beyond his control. As the second wave of applause finally subsided, Dennis watched something remarkable happen. His sons, standing together at center stage, seemed to make a silent decision. Marcus stepped forward to the microphone, his voice still soft but somehow carrying to every corner of the auditorium. "Thank you," he said simply. We don't have another song prepared. We just wanted to share something that was special to us, something our mum gave us before she died." We're glad it meant something to you, too. The honesty in his words created another moment of profound silence. This wasn't the polished gratitude of experienced performers. This was a 12-year-old boy acknowledging a gift he didn't fully understand, trying to process an experience that was bigger than anything he'd imagined possible. Lucas stepped forward and added, "We miss her every day. But when we sing her song, it feels like she's still with us. Maybe that's what you felt too, like someone you miss was here with you tonight." The impact of those words was immediate and visible. Throughout the audience, Dennis could see people wiping away tears that had nothing to do with the quality of the performance and everything to do with the recognition of shared loss, shared love, shared humanity. But along with the emotional connection came something else that Dennis was beginning to recognize as both a blessing and a burden: opportunity. He could see it in the way certain adults in the audience were looking at his sons now, not just with appreciation for what they'd shared, but with calculation about what they might represent. A woman in an expensive suit was making her way toward the stage, business card already in hand. A man with a professional camera was positioning himself for a better shot. Parents were beginning to cluster in small groups, their conversations animated with the kind of excitement that comes when people think they've discovered something valuable. Mrs. Phillips sensed the shift too. "Dennis," she said quietly, "I think you need to get the boys off the stage. This is getting bigger than they're ready for." But before Dennis could move, something happened that would later define not just that evening, but the entire trajectory of his family's life. A voice called out from the audience, clear and strong enough to cut through the murmur of excited conversations. "Wait." The voice belonged to the tired mother Dennis had been watching throughout the performance. She was standing now, her daughter beside her, and her words carried the authority of someone who had something important to say. "Before everyone starts talking about what comes next, can we just acknowledge what these boys gave us tonight? They shared something sacred. They trusted us with their grief and their love. Before we turn this into something else, can we just say thank you?" Her words created a moment of stillness that felt almost sacred. The business card-wielding woman paused mid-stride. The photographer lowered his camera. The excited conversations died away as people remembered that they had just witnessed something precious and vulnerable, something that deserved reverence. Before it received attention, Marcus and Lucas looked out at the woman who had spoken, and Dennis could see them recognizing something in her face, the same recognition he'd seen earlier, the acknowledgement of shared struggle and mutual understanding. "Thank you," Lucas said simply, speaking directly to her. "Thank you for listening." And in that moment, Dennis understood that his sons had learned something that many performers never discover: the difference between being heard and being understood, between receiving applause and creating connection, between success and significance. The revelation wasn't just about their voices or their talent. It was about their capacity to transform a room full of strangers into a community of people who suddenly remembered what it felt like to be genuinely moved by something real and honest and true. But Dennis also understood that this moment of recognition came with a price. His sons were no longer just his sons. They had become something public, something that other people would want to claim and shape and use. The challenge now would be protecting what was precious about their gift, while allowing it to grow and touch the lives it was meant to reach. As the curtain finally fell and his boys walked off the stage toward him, Dennis knew that their lives had changed forever. The question now was whether that change would preserve what was beautiful about their music or consume it entirely. The chaos began before they even made it to the school parking lot. As Dennis guided Lucas and Marcus through the backstage area, trying to find a quiet moment to process what had just happened, they were intercepted by a stream of people who seemed to materialize from nowhere. Parents, teachers, and complete strangers pressed business cards into Dennis's hands, each one promising opportunities that sounded too good to be true. Good to be true. "Mr. Carter, I represent several young artists in the region," said a woman in a sharp navy suit, her smile as polished as her manicured nails. "Your boys have something very special. With the right management, the right coaching, they could be performing at major venues within the year." Behind her, a man with an expensive camera pushed forward. "I'm with the Springfield Tribune. Could we get a few photos of the boys? Maybe a quick interview about their musical background." Dennis felt Lucas and Marcus press closer to his sides, their earlier confidence evaporating in the face of this aggressive attention. This wasn't the gentle appreciation they'd received from the audience during their performance. This felt predatory, like people circling something valuable they wanted to claim. "I appreciate your interest," Dennis said carefully, his protective instincts flaring. "But the boys are tired. It's been a big night." Of course," the woman in the suit said, her tone suggesting she was used to getting what she wanted, through persistence rather than respect. "But opportunities like this don't wait, Mr. Carter. There's a children's talent competition in Kansas City next month. Winner gets a recording contract and professional representation. With their natural ability and the right coaching, your sons could easily take first place." The word coaching hit Dennis like a physical blow. He thought about the polished performances they'd witnessed earlier in the evening. Technically perfect, but emotionally hollow. He imagined his sons' raw, honest voices being shaped and molded until they sounded like everyone else, until their music became a product rather than a prayer. "We're not interested in competitions," Dennis said firmly. The woman's smile faltered slightly. "Mr. Carter, I don't think you understand what you're turning down. Your sons have real talent, but talent without proper development is just potential. They need professional training, media coaching, image consulting. The music industry is incredibly competitive, and without the right support, they'll end up like every other manufactured act that sounds exactly the same," Dennis finished. "No, thank you." As they finally made it outside, Dennis thought they'd escaped the pressure, but the parking lot brought new challenges. Several parents from the audience were waiting by their car, and their approach felt different from the business people inside, more personal but no less complicated. "Mr. Carter?" A well-dressed woman approached with her teenage daughter in tow. "I'm Sandra Walsh, president of the Riverside Booster Club. That was absolutely incredible in there. We're planning our annual fundraising gala next month, and we'd love to have the boys perform. It's for a good cause. New band equipment for the school." Dennis felt the familiar tug of wanting to help, especially when it involved supporting the school that had given his sons this opportunity. But something in the woman's tone, the casual way she assumed his son's time was available for her event, made him hesitate. "We'd be happy to discuss it," he said diplomatically. "Wonderful, we can pay them, of course. Nothing huge, maybe $200 for a 20-minute set. Though honestly, after tonight, I think we could get corporate sponsors involved. This could be really big for them." Lucas and Marcus exchanged a look that Dennis recognized, the weight of adult expectations settling on their young shoulders like a heavy coat. They'd performed one song, shared one piece of their hearts, and already people were talking about building their careers, managing their futures, turning their grief into profit. The drive home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than the nervous silence they'd shared on the way to the school. This was the quiet of processing, of trying to understand what had just happened and what it might mean for their future. "Dad," Marcus finally said as they pulled into their apartment complex, "did we do something wrong?" The question caught Dennis off guard. "Wrong, Marcus, you were incredible up there, both of you. You did exactly what you were supposed to do." "Then why does it feel weird now?" Lucas asked. "Like everyone wants something from us." Dennis parked the car and turned to face his sons. In the dim light of the parking lot, they looked young and vulnerable, still wearing their thrift store shirts that now felt insufficient for the attention they'd received. Because success changes things, Dennis said honestly. And sometimes, people see talent and think about what they can do with it, instead of appreciating it for what it is. Over the next few days, the calls started. The woman from the talent agency left 3 voicemails. The Tribune photographer showed up at their apartment complex, claiming he just wanted to follow up on the story. Mrs. Phillips called to warn them that several other schools had already contacted the district office, asking if the Carter boys were available for their events. But the real pressure came from an unexpected source, the school itself. Principal Martinez called Dennis to his office 3 days after the talent show, and the conversation that followed would test everything Dennis believed about protecting his son's gift. "Mr. Carter," Principal Martinez began, settling behind his desk with the uncomfortable air of someone delivering news he'd rather avoid. "I wanted to discuss the boys' performance the other night. It was quite remarkable, really. The school board is very impressed." Dennis waited, sensing there was more coming. "The thing is, we've had several inquiries about Lucas and Marcus. The district is planning a showcase for potential donors next month. People who might fund our new arts program. Having the boys perform would be, well, it would be very beneficial for the school." "Beneficial how?" Dennis asked. "Financially. These donors respond to emotion, to stories. Your boys have a compelling story. The loss of their mother, their musical gift emerging from tragedy. It's exactly the kind of narrative that opens checkbooks." Dennis felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You want to use my son's grief to raise money? That's not how I'd put it," Martinez said quickly. "I'd say we want to showcase their talent to help secure funding that will benefit all our students, including Lucas and Marcus." "And if I say no?" Martinez's expression hardened slightly. "Well, that's your choice, of course. But I should mention that there have been some questions about the boys' enrollment status. Technically, Marcus missed several days earlier this semester when you were between apartments. The district has strict attendance policies." The threat was subtle but clear. Dennis felt his hands clench into fists. "Are you saying that if my sons don't perform at your fundraiser, you'll find reasons to make their lives difficult here?" "I'm saying that the school appreciates students who contribute to the community, and the community appreciates the school in return." Dennis stood up, his decision crystal clear. "Principal Martinez, my sons shared something sacred that night. They trusted this school with their hearts, and you want to turn that into a sales pitch. That's not going to happen." "Mr. Carter, I think you're being very short-sighted. This could open doors for your boys, provide opportunities. The same opportunities that turned that little girl with the Broadway song into a performing machine. The same opportunities that made every other kid up there sound like they were auditioning for a television show instead of sharing something real." Dennis walked toward the door, then turned back. "My sons have a gift, but it's not the kind of gift that gets better when you put it under bright lights and ask it to dance for money. Some things are too precious to sell." As he left the principal's office, Dennis realized that the real challenge wasn't going to be developing his son's talent. It was going to be protecting it from everyone who wanted to use it for their own purposes. The battle for Lucas and Marcus's authenticity had only just begun. The phone calls stopped after Dennis made one thing clear: the Carter family wasn't for sale. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes before a storm, heavy with unspoken consequences and looming decisions that couldn't be avoided forever. For 2 weeks after the talent show, life tried to return to normal. Dennis went back to his job at the construction site. Lucas and Marcus returned to their classes, and their apartment settled back into the familiar rhythms of homework, dinner, and evening conversations. But something fundamental had shifted, and they all felt it. The boys were different now, not because success had changed them, but because they tasted what it felt like to be truly heard. Their voices around the apartment had gained a new confidence, and Dennis often caught them experimenting with harmonies while they did dishes or folded laundry. They weren't performing, they were exploring, discovering new depths to the gift they'd always carried. Mrs. Phillips had become an unexpected ally in their journey. She started staying after school once a week, working with Lucas and Marcus, not to polish their technique, but to help them understand the power they possessed. Her approach was different from the vocal coaches and talent agents who had tried to claim them. She treated their voices like sacred instruments that needed to be honored, not manufactured products that needed to be improved. Music isn't about perfection, she told them during one of their sessions in the empty classroom. It's about connection. What you boys did at the talent show wasn't just singing, it was ministry. You helped people remember what it feels like to be human. But Mrs. Phillips also brought news that complicated their newfound peace. There's something you need to know, she said to Dennis after one of their sessions. The district is planning to cut the music program next year. Budget constraints. Principal Martinez thinks that if he could show the school board how much community support the arts program has, he might be able to save it. Dennis felt his jaw tighten. Let me guess, he wants the boys to perform at another fundraiser. Not exactly. He wants them to perform at the school board meeting next month, in front of the people who make the budget decisions. He thinks their story, your story, could make the difference between keeping music education alive for hundreds of students or watching it disappear. The weight of this new responsibility settled on Dennis like a physical burden. It wasn't about money or fame now. It was about other kids having the same opportunity that had changed his sons' lives. How could he say no to that? But when he presented the situation to Lucas and Marcus that evening, their response surprised him. We want to do it, Lucas said without hesitation. But not the way Principal Martinez wants us to, Marcus added. We don't want to be his sad story that makes people feel guilty enough to write checks. Dennis looked at his sons, seeing a maturity in their faces that hadn't been there a month ago. What do you mean? We want to show them what music education actually does, Lucas explained. Not tell them about Mom's death and make them cry, but show them how Mrs. Phillips helped us understand that our voices matter. Show them what happens when someone believes in kids who don't look like they have anything special to offer. Over the next 2 weeks, they began preparing, not for a performance, but for something Dennis could only describe as a mission. Mrs. Phillips helped them select a piece that showcased not just their natural harmony, but the technical skills she'd helped them develop. They chose an arrangement of Bridge Over Troubled Water that required them to support each other vocally in ways that mirrored how they'd supported each other emotionally throughout their lives. But their preparation went beyond just the music. Dennis watched as his sons began to understand the broader implications of what they were doing. They weren't just singing for their own recognition anymore. They were representing every kid who had ever been overlooked, every student who had found their voice through arts education, every family who had discovered that music could heal wounds that medicine couldn't touch. Dad, Marcus said one evening as they worked on the bridge section of their song, what if we mess up? What if we don't sing well enough to save the music program? Dennis set down the coffee mug he'd been holding and looked at his sons. Really, looked at them. A month ago, they'd been two shy boys afraid to be heard. Now they were young men, willing to shoulder the responsibility of speaking for others who couldn't speak for themselves. You know what your mom used to tell me when I was worried about providing for you boys? Dennis asked. She said that love always finds a way to be enough. You're not going up there to be perfect. You're going up there to love music, to love the kids who need what you needed, to love the teachers who believe in students others have given up on. The night before the school board meeting, they held their own kind of dress rehearsal in their tiny living room. No stage lights, no audience, just three people who had learned to make music out of the hardest parts of life. As their voices blended in the familiar space where they'd first found harmony, Dennis felt something he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. Absolute certainty that they were doing exactly what they were meant to do. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he told his sons, as their voices faded into the comfortable silence of home, "you're already successful. Not because of how you sing, but because of who you've become." Lucas and Marcus exchanged one of their twin looks, then Marcus spoke for both of them. "We're not scared anymore, Dad. We know why we're singing now." The next morning brought unexpected news. Mrs. Phillips called just as they were getting ready to leave for the school board meeting. "Dennis, there's something you need to know before you get here," she said, her voice tight with concern. "Word got out about the boys' performance tonight. There are reporters here, and that talent agent woman from the night of the talent show, Ida, she's here too, with some kind of contract." Dennis felt his stomach drop. They'd managed to keep their preparation private, but somehow the vultures had found them again. "There's more," Mrs. Phillips continued. "Principal Martinez told the school board that the boys have been offered professional representation. He's trying to use their potential success as leverage, saying that if they cut the music program, they'll be responsible for stunting the development of nationally recognized talent." Dennis closed his eyes, feeling the familiar anger rise in his chest. Even now, even when they were trying to do something purely for the benefit of other students, someone was trying to turn his sons into a commodity. "Mrs. Phillips," he said quietly, "do the boys know about this?" "Not yet. But Dennis, there's something else. The school board members seem more interested in meeting the boys who might be famous someday than in hearing about music education. This whole thing is turning into exactly what you were trying to avoid." Dennis looked at Lucas and Marcus, who were putting on their good shirts and warming up their voices, preparing to use their gift to help other students have the same opportunities they'd found. They deserved better than being turned into props in someone else's agenda. "We're still coming," Dennis said finally, "but we're going to do this our way, no matter who's in that room or what they want from us." As they drove toward the school, Dennis realized that this wasn't just about saving a music program anymore. This was about proving that authentic gifts could survive in a world that wanted to package and sell everything beautiful. This was about showing his sons that they could use their voices to make a difference without losing what made their voices special in the first place. The real test of their strength was waiting for them in that school board meeting room. The Riverside Middle School Library had been transformed into something that looked more like a media circus than a school board meeting. As Dennis and his sons approached the building, they could see news vans in the parking lot and reporters checking their equipment. The simple community gathering they'd expected had become something much more complicated and potentially dangerous to what they were trying to accomplish. Inside, the normally quiet library buzzed with an energy that felt more like a trial than a budget discussion. The school board members sat at a long table at the front of the room, but Dennis could see that their attention was divided between the official agenda and the unusual crowd that had gathered. Instead of the typical dozen parents and teachers who usually attended these meetings, the room was packed with nearly 100 people. Reporters, curious community members, and several individuals Dennis recognized from the talent show who looked like they'd come to see a repeat performance rather than support education funding. In the third row, Dennis spotted the woman in the navy suit who had approached them after the talent show. She was flanked by two men in expensive suits, and they had the predatory focus of people who smelled opportunity. Near the back, a television reporter was setting up a camera, apparently planning to broadcast whatever happened here to a much wider audience. "Dad," Marcus whispered, his voice tight with anxiety. "This doesn't feel right." Dennis squeezed his son's shoulder. "No, it doesn't. But we're not here for them. We're here for the kids who need music in their lives the same way you needed it in yours." Mrs. Phillips met them at the entrance, her face flushed with stress and anger. "Dennis, I'm so sorry. I tried to keep this quiet, but somehow word got out. Principal Martinez even issued a press release about locally discovered talent appearing tonight." Dennis felt his jaw clench. Even now, even when they were trying to do something purely altruistic, someone was trying to turn his sons into a marketing opportunity. "The board members want to meet the boys before the formal presentation," Mrs. Phillips continued. "But I should warn you, some of them seem more interested in the publicity angle than the education funding." As they made their way toward the front of the room, Dennis watched his sons navigate the gauntlet of attention with a grace that surprised him. People called out to them, phones appeared to capture candid photos, and several adults tried to intercept them with business cards and whispered offers. But Lucas and Marcus kept their focus forward, acknowledging the attention politely without engaging with it. The school board chairwoman, Dr. Patricia Winters, was a stern-looking woman in her 60s who had the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had been dealing with budget crises for decades. She studied Lucas and Marcus with the calculating gaze of someone trying to determine their usefulness to her agenda. "Mr. Carter," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand, "we're so pleased that your sons are willing to support our music program. I understand they've received some very interesting offers recently." Dennis felt the familiar protective instinct flare. "They're here to talk about music education, not their personal opportunities." "Of course," Dr. Winters replied, though her smile suggested she saw those two things as inseparable. "But surely you understand that having students who are gaining recognition reflects well on our programs. It shows that we're producing results." Before Dennis could respond, Lucas stepped forward. "Excuse me, Dr. Winters," he said, his voice carrying a confidence that made Dennis's chest swell with pride. "But I think there might be some confusion about why we're here." The chairwoman looked surprised to be addressed directly by a 12-year-old, but something in Lucas's tone commanded attention. "Oh, we're not here because we're getting famous or because people want to make us into something we're not," Lucas continued. "We're here because Mrs. Phillips believed in us before anyone else did. We're here because music class gave us a place to belong when we didn't fit anywhere else. And we're here because there are other kids in this district who need that same chance." Marcus stepped up beside his brother. "If you cut the music program, you're not just cutting budget lines, you're cutting hope. You're telling kids like us that their voices don't matter unless someone can make money from them." The room had gone completely quiet. This wasn't what anyone had expected, not the school board members who wanted to use the boys' potential. Fame as leverage, not the reporters who had come for a feel-good story about local talent, and certainly not the talent agents who were hoping to turn this into a recruitment opportunity. Dr. Winters recovered quickly, her political instincts kicking in. "Well, that's very touching, boys, but the reality is that we have limited resources and difficult choices to make. If you could perform something for us that demonstrates the quality of our music education—" "No," Dennis said quietly, but the word carried across the entire room. "That's not what we're here to do." Every head in the room turned toward him. The cameras focused. The talent agents leaned forward. Dr. Winters looked genuinely shocked that someone had just refused her request. "Mr. Carter," she said carefully, "I think there may be some misunderstanding. Your sons agreed to perform." "My sons agreed to speak about the importance of music education," Dennis corrected. "They didn't agree to be your entertainment or your promotional tool." He looked out at the packed room, at the reporters who wanted a story, the agents who wanted a product, the board members who wanted a political win, and the handful of teachers and parents who actually cared about education. Then he looked at his sons, who were watching him with absolute trust. "Lucas, Marcus," he said, "you have something to say to these people. Not something to sing, something to say. This is your moment to use your voices for what really matters." What happened next would be talked about in Riverside for years to come. Instead of performing, Lucas and Marcus began to speak, not with the practiced cadence of prepared remarks, but with the raw honesty that had made their singing so powerful. They talked about what it felt like to be the kids nobody expected anything from. They talked about how Mrs. Phillips had seen something in them that they hadn't seen in themselves. They talked about the other students in the music program, kids with learning disabilities who found their confidence in chorus, shy students who discovered their leadership abilities in band, teenagers from troubled homes who found family among the musicians. "Music education isn't about creating stars," Marcus said, his voice steady and clear. "It's about creating humans. It's about giving kids a language for feelings they can't express any other way." Lucas picked up the thread. "And if you cut this program, you're not just saving money. You're silencing voices that deserve to be heard. You're telling an entire generation of students that the arts don't matter, that beauty doesn't matter, that their souls don't matter." The room was completely silent now, but it was a different kind of silence than they'd experienced at the talent show. This wasn't the hush of entertainment. This was the quiet of people being forced to confront uncomfortable truths. Then Marcus did something that no one expected. He began to sing, but not a performance piece. He sang the opening bars of a simple warm-up exercise that Mrs. Phillips had taught them, and within seconds, other voices began to join in. Students from the music program who were scattered throughout the audience. It wasn't a concert. It wasn't a demonstration. It was proof. Proof that music education creates community, that it builds connections between people who might otherwise never find each other, that it transforms ordinary moments into something sacred. When the last note faded away, Dr. Winters was wiping tears from her eyes. Several board members were staring at their hands, suddenly unable to meet the gaze of the students and parents in the room. Even the reporters had lowered their cameras, recognizing that they were witnessing something too authentic to be captured in a news segment. In that moment, Lucas and Marcus had done something that all the talent agents and marketing professionals in the world couldn't have accomplished. They had made a room full of adults remember why music mattered in the first place. The silence that followed the impromptu chorus of music students lasted for what felt like an eternity. Dr. Winters sat at the head of the board table. Her composure finally cracked, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue while trying to maintain some semblance of official dignity. Around the room, Dennis could see the impact of what his sons had just accomplished written on every face. From the hardened reporters who had come expecting a simple human interest story to the cynical board members who had been prepared to make another round of budget cuts, but it was the students scattered throughout the audience who told the real story. Dennis watched as teenagers who normally wouldn't be caught dead, showing emotion in public, wiped away tears and reached out to comfort each other. These were the kids Lucas and Marcus had been speaking for. The ones who found their voices in chorus, their confidence in band, their families in music programs that were always first on the chopping block when money got tight. Dr. Winters cleared her throat, her voice noticeably less steady than it had been at the beginning of the meeting. I think we need to take a brief recess to consider what we've heard tonight." As the board members filed out for their deliberation, the room erupted into a buzz of conversation, but it wasn't the excited chatter Dennis had expected. Instead, people were speaking in hushed, reverent tones, as if they'd just witnessed something sacred and were afraid that speaking too loudly might break the spell. Mrs. Phillips appeared at Dennis's side, her face glowing with pride and relief. "Dennis, what your boys just did, that wasn't just advocacy. That was leadership. They turned a political meeting into a moment of genuine human connection. But even as Mrs. Phillips spoke, Dennis noticed the talent agents working the room, trying to salvage their opportunity from what must have felt like a public relations disaster. The woman in the navy suit was speaking urgently to one of the reporters, gesturing toward Lucas and Marcus with the desperate energy of someone watching a valuable opportunity slip away. "Mr. Carter," she called out, approaching with renewed determination. "What your sons did tonight was impressive, but surely you see how this proves my point. They have natural leadership abilities, charisma, stage presence. With the right development, they could be speaking to audiences of thousands, not just school board meetings." Dennis felt Lucas and Marcus move closer to his sides, and he could sense their discomfort with being discussed like commodities while they were standing right there. "Ma'am," he said politely but firmly, "my sons just proved that they don't need development. They need protection from people who want to turn their authenticity into a brand." The woman's smile became strained. "Mr. Carter, I understand your protective instincts, but you're thinking too small. These boys could inspire millions of people, could make real money while making a real difference. Don't let pride stand in the way of their potential." Before Dennis could respond, Marcus stepped forward. His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly in the crowded room. "Excuse me, but I think you misunderstood what just happened here." The talent agent looked startled to be addressed directly by a 12-year-old. "Oh, we didn't do this to show off or to get discovered," Marcus continued. "We did this because kids we've never met deserve the same chance Mrs. Phillips gave us. If you turn that into a career opportunity, you've missed the whole point." Lucas nodded beside his brother. "And honestly, if inspiring millions of people means we have to stop being ourselves, then we'd rather inspire the dozen kids in our music class who know we care about them because we're real, not because we're performing caring." The agent opened and closed her mouth several times, clearly unprepared for such articulate rejection from someone young enough to be in middle school. Around them, Dennis noticed that their conversation had attracted attention. Parents, teachers, and students were listening, and many were nodding in agreement with what the boys had just said. Dr. Winters returned to the front of the room, and the official meeting resumed. "The board has reached a decision regarding the music program funding," she announced, her voice carrying a weight that suggested this was about more than just budget numbers. Dennis held his breath. Lucas and Marcus stood beside him, no longer the nervous boys who had entered this room an hour ago, but young advocates who had already succeeded regardless of what the board decided. They had found their voices, not as performers, but as leaders, and that transformation was worth more than any funding decision. After careful consideration of tonight's presentations, Dr. Winters continued, the board has voted unanimously to not only maintain funding for the music education program, but to increase it by 15% for the next academic year. The room erupted in cheers and applause, but Dr. Winters raised her hand for quiet. "However, this decision comes with a condition. We want Mrs. Phillips to develop a program that replicates what we witnessed tonight. Not the performance aspect, but the advocacy aspect. We want our music students to understand that their education isn't just about personal achievement, but about community building and leadership development." Mrs. Phillips stood up, her face radiant with excitement. "Dr. Winters, I would be honored to develop such a program, and I think I know exactly the right students to help design it." She looked directly at Lucas and Marcus, and Dennis saw his sons exchange one of their twin glances before nodding in unison. As the official meeting concluded and people began to file out, Dennis found himself surrounded by parents, teachers, and community members who wanted to thank his family for what they'd accomplished. But the conversation that meant the most came from an unexpected source. A teenage girl approached hesitantly, her eyes red from crying. "Excuse me," she said to Lucas and Marcus. "I'm in the choir, and I just wanted to say thank you. I've been thinking about quitting because some kids at school make fun of music students, but after tonight, I remember why I love singing. Not because I'm good at it, but because it makes me feel like I belong somewhere. Marcus smiled at her. What's your name? Emma. Emma, the kids who make fun of music students are just scared of people who are brave enough to feel things deeply. Don't quit. The world needs your voice. As they finally made their way to the parking lot, Dennis reflected on what had just happened. His sons had entered this evening as talented boys trying to save a music program. They were leaving as young leaders who had discovered they could use their voices to make a real difference in their community. The talent agents were long gone, having recognized that the Carter boys were never going to be the kind of manufactured success story they specialized in creating. The reporters had their story, but it wasn't the simple feel-good piece they'd expected. It was something more complex and ultimately more powerful. Dad, Lucas said as they reached their car, do you think we did the right thing, saying no to all those opportunities? Dennis looked at his sons, really looked at them. A few months ago, they'd been two shy boys afraid to let their voices be heard. Tonight, they'd stood in front of a room full of adults and spoken truth, with the kind of courage that most people never develop, even in a lifetime. Boys, he said, you didn't say no to opportunities tonight. You said yes to the right ones. You chose to use your gifts to lift up other people instead of elevating yourselves. That's not just the right thing. That's the heroic thing. As they drove home through the quiet streets of their small town, Dennis realized that his sons had learned something that many successful people never discover, that the most meaningful performances aren't on stages in front of strangers, but in moments when you choose to use whatever gifts you have to make someone else's life a little better. The music program was saved, but more importantly, Lucas and Marcus had saved themselves from becoming something they were never meant to be. 6 months after the school board meeting that changed everything, Dennis stood in the doorway of what had once been Riverside Middle, school's smallest classroom, and marveled at the transformation taking place inside. The room buzzed with an energy he'd never seen in an educational setting. Teenagers were leading discussions, younger students were finding their voices, and Mrs. Phillips moved between small groups like a conductor, orchestrating something beautiful and organic. This was the music advocacy program that had grown out of that pivotal evening, and Lucas and Marcus were at its heart. But not in the way anyone might have expected. They weren't the stars of the program. They were its foundation, teaching other students that advocacy wasn't about performing for adults, but about speaking authentic truth in service of something bigger than yourself. The key, Marcus was, explaining to a group of 8th graders who looked up to him with the kind of respect usually reserved for high school seniors, is to remember that you're not trying to impress anyone. You're trying to connect with them. When you speak from your heart about something you really care about, people can tell the difference. Dennis watched his son, no longer the shy boy who had been afraid to let his voice be heard, but not yet the manufactured performer that so many people had wanted him to become. Instead, Marcus had evolved into something rarer and more valuable, a young person who understood that real influence came from authenticity, not from perfection. The program had attracted attention from educators across the state, not because it produced star performers, but because it consistently turned out students who could articulate their thoughts, advocate for their beliefs, and build bridges between different communities. The waiting list for enrollment was now longer than the program could accommodate, and Dennis regularly fielded calls from parents in other districts asking how they could replicate what Riverside had created. But success had brought its own challenges. The talent agents hadn't given up entirely. They'd just gotten more sophisticated in their approach. Instead of direct offers, they now came with proposals for educational partnerships and youth leadership development opportunities that sounded altruistic but carried all the same strings as their original offers. Just last week, a television producer had approached the school with an idea for a documentary series about kids who are changing the world through advocacy. The proposal looked legitimate, even inspiring, until Dennis read the fine print and realized they wanted to follow Lucas and Marcus around with cameras for 6 months, turning their genuine work into content for a streaming platform. "Dad," Lucas had said when Dennis showed him the proposal, "why do they keep trying to make us into something we're not?" It was a question that Dennis had been grappling with for months. His sons had proven that authentic voices could create real change, but the success of that authenticity had made them targets for people who wanted to package and sell that same authenticity to wider audiences. The answer had come from an unexpected source. Emma, the choir student who had approached them after the school board meeting, was now one of the program's most effective advocates. At 17, she had developed into a powerful speaker who could move audiences to tears, not through manipulation, but through the simple act of sharing her own journey from insecurity to confidence. "They keep trying to change you because what you have is rare," she had told Lucas and Marcus during one of their program sessions. "Most people in the entertainment industry have forgotten what authentic looks like. When they see the real thing, they assume it's a performance that can be replicated and sold." But Emma had also identified something else that Dennis was only beginning to understand. His son's influence was spreading far beyond what any television show or recording contract could have achieved. The music advocacy program had inspired similar programs in 3 other school districts. Students who had been through the program were starting advocacy initiatives at their high schools. Teachers were reporting that students who had learned to speak authentically about music education were applying those same skills to environmental issues, social justice causes, and community service projects. Mrs. Phillips had become something of a celebrity in education circles, invited to speak at conferences about arts education and student leadership development. But she remained grounded in the same principles that had guided her work with Lucas and Marcus from the beginning. The goal was never to create performers, she told Dennis during one of their regular check-ins about the program. The goal was to help students understand that their voices matter, that their experiences have value, and that they can use both to make their communities better places. Dennis had started receiving invitations to speak at parent groups and education conferences about raising children who could resist the pressures of a culture that wanted to turn every talent into a brand. These speaking opportunities had initially made him uncomfortable. He wasn't a professional educator or child development expert, just a father who had tried to protect his son's authenticity in a world that valued marketability over meaning. But as he began accepting some of these invitations, Dennis discovered that his perspective was exactly what many parents needed to hear. In a culture of competitive parenting and endless opportunities for children to be discovered, his message was simple but revolutionary. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for a talented young person is help them understand the difference between success and significance. Lucas and Marcus could have had recording contracts, television appearances, and international recognition, he would tell audiences of parents who were navigating their own children's talents and opportunities. Instead, they chose to use their gifts to make their school and community better places. 6 months later, they're happier, more confident, and having a bigger impact than any amount of fame could have given them. The boys themselves had continued to grow in ways that surprised everyone, including Dennis. They still sang together, but their music had evolved beyond their mother's lullabies into something more complex and sophisticated. They were writing their own songs now, pieces that reflected their experiences as advocates and leaders rather than just their experiences as grieving sons. More importantly, they had learned to see their musical gifts as tools for service rather than paths to personal advancement. When the local senior center asked if they would perform for residents during the holidays, they said yes immediately. When a neighboring elementary school wanted them to teach younger students about using their voices, they volunteered their time without hesitation. These weren't the high-profile opportunities that talent agents would have arranged for them. They were the kinds of meaningful connections that build character and create lasting impact in communities. And Dennis could see that his sons understood the difference. The most telling moment had come just 2 weeks earlier, when a major record label executive had finally tracked them down with an offer that was genuinely impressive, a development deal that would have allowed them to maintain creative control while accessing professional production and marketing resources. Dennis had expected this to be the moment when all their previous rejections would finally be tested by a truly attractive opportunity. But Lucas and Marcus had listened politely to the executive's presentation, asked thoughtful questions about the implications and expectations, and then declined with a grace that left even the seasoned industry professional impressed. "Why?" the executive had asked. "This is exactly the kind of opportunity that artists spend years trying to create." "Because," Marcus had answered simply, "we're not trying to become artists. We're trying to become the kind of people who use whatever gifts we have to make other people's lives better. And right now, we're doing that more effectively here than we could anywhere else." Dennis had never been prouder of his sons than in that moment, watching them choose significance over success with the same clarity and conviction they had shown at the school board meeting 6 months earlier. 2 years after that first talent show performance that changed everything, Dennis Carter stood in the wings of the Riverside High School auditorium, watching his sons prepare for what would be their final performance as students in the district's music program. But this wasn't a goodbye. It was a celebration of everything they had built together and a launching pad for the next chapter of their journey. The auditorium was packed, but not with talent scouts or record executives. The audience was filled with students, teachers, parents, and community members who had been touched by the music advocacy program that Lucas and Marcus had helped create. Former participants who were now in high school sat beside elementary students who were just beginning to find their voices. Teachers from other districts had traveled hours to witness what had become known throughout the region as the Riverside model of arts education. At 15, Lucas and Marcus had grown into young men whose confidence came not from external validation, but from the knowledge that they had used their gifts to make a genuine difference in their community. They were taller now, their voices had deepened and matured, but their core values remained unchanged. They still chose authenticity over artifice, service over self-promotion, and community impact over personal advancement. The program they had helped build now served over 200 students across 3 schools, with a waiting list that stretched into the hundreds. More importantly, it had fundamentally changed how the district thought about arts education. Instead of viewing music and theater programs as nice-to-have extras that could be cut when budgets got tight, the school board now saw them as essential components of student development and community building. Mrs. Phillips, now the district's Director of Arts Education, had become a nationally recognized expert in student advocacy and authentic leadership development. She received dozens of invitations each month to speak at conferences and consult with other districts, but she had remained grounded in the same principles that had guided her work with Lucas and Marcus from the beginning. The goal was never to create the next generation of performers, she would tell audiences of educators and administrators. The goal was to create the next generation of citizens, young people who understand that their voices matter, that their experiences have value and that they have both the right and the responsibility to speak up for what they believe in. Tonight's performance was a showcase of everything the program had accomplished. Students would be presenting original compositions, leading community discussions, and demonstrating the advocacy skills they had developed. But the evening would culminate with Lucas and Marcus performing together one final time before they graduated and moved on to the next phase of their lives. Dennis had been wondering what this moment would feel like for months. His sons had received full academic scholarships to the state university, where they planned to study education and social work respectively. They had both been accepted into the honors program, and several professors had already expressed interest in mentoring them. Their futures were bright and full of possibility, but they would be leaving behind the community that had shaped them and the program they had helped create. What Dennis hadn't expected was how ready they seemed for this transition. Over the past 2 years, Lucas and Marcus had grown into their roles as leaders and mentors in ways that made it clear they were prepared to take their values and skills into new environments. They had learned to see their gifts not as possessions to be guarded, but as tools to be shared in service of others. The performance began with current students sharing their own stories of growth and discovery through the program. Emma, now a senior, spoke about how learning to advocate for arts education had given her the confidence to run for student body president and launch a mental health awareness initiative. A 7th grader named David, who had started the program barely able to speak above a whisper, led the audience in a discussion about the importance of creating safe spaces for students who learned differently. But it was the final presentation that brought the evening full circle. Lucas and Marcus took the stage together, but instead of performing one of their mother's lullabies or showcasing their technical skills, they did something completely unexpected. They invited every student who had ever been part of the music advocacy program to join them on stage. What followed was a chorus of over 100 voices, ranging in age from 9 to 18, singing a song that the boys had written specifically for this moment. The lyrics weren't about their own journey or accomplishments. They were about the power of authentic community, the importance of using your voice to lift others up, and the responsibility that comes with having gifts that can make a difference. We are the voices that refuse to be silenced. We are the hearts that choose to stay true. We are the hands that reach out to lift others. We are the change that starts with me and you. As the chorus swelled and filled the auditorium, Dennis looked out at the audience and saw something remarkable. Parents were crying, teachers were beaming with pride, and students were swaying together in a moment of genuine unity that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with connection. But it was the faces of Lucas and Marcus that told the real story. They weren't performing for the audience, they were celebrating with their community. Their joy wasn't coming from being the center of attention, but from seeing the impact of what they had helped create. They had learned the secret that many talented people never discover, that the most fulfilling success comes not from personal achievement, but from using your gifts to create opportunities for others. As the song ended and the applause began, Dennis realized that his sons had accomplished something that no amount of fame or commercial success could have matched. They had created a legacy, not the kind of legacy that gets recorded in history books or celebrated on red carpets, but the kind that lives on in the hearts and minds of people whose lives have been genuinely changed. After the formal program ended, the evening continued with an informal reception where current and former program participants mingled with community members and visiting educators. Dennis watched as his sons moved through the crowd, not as celebrities being celebrated, but as young leaders checking in on the people they cared about and making sure everyone felt included in the celebration. a reporter from the State Education Journal approached Dennis for an interview, but her questions weren't about talent or performance. They were about parenting and values in an age of social media and instant fame. Mr. Carter, she asked, your sons have had opportunities that most young people can only dream of, but they've consistently chosen community service over personal advancement. How did you raise children who could make those kinds of choices? Dennis thought for a moment, watching as Lucas helped a shy sixth grader introduce herself to a group of high school students, and Marcus knelt down to listen seriously to something a 9-year-old was trying to tell him. I think the secret is remembering that children aren't projects to be perfected or products to be marketed, he said finally. They're people who are figuring out who they want to become. My job wasn't to make my sons successful. It was to help them understand what success actually means. The reporter pressed further. And what does success mean to them? Dennis smiled, remembering the scared, shy boys who had once sat in his car, afraid to let their voices be heard. Success means using whatever gifts you have to make someone else's life a little better. It means staying true to your values, even when other people offer you easier paths. And it means understanding that the most important audience isn't the one applauding you, it's the one you're trying to serve. As the evening wound down and families began heading home, Dennis found himself alone with his sons for the first time in hours. They stood together in the now empty auditorium, 3 people who had traveled an unexpected journey from tragedy to healing to purpose. Dad, Marcus said quietly, do you think we made the right choices? Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd said yes to some of those opportunities. Dennis looked at his sons, young men who had learned to measure success not by what they had gained, but by what they had given. Boys, he said, I can't tell you what would have happened if you'd made different choices, but I can tell you this. The choices you made turned you into the kind of people your mother would be proud of. And they turned you into the kind of people the world needs more of. Lucas nodded thoughtfully. We're going to miss this place, miss the program, miss the kids. But you're not leaving it behind, Dennis reminded them. You're taking everything you've learned here and carrying it forward. The music advocacy program was never about this building or even this community. It was about the idea that young people can use their voices to create positive change. That idea is going with you, wherever you go. As they walked out of the auditorium together, Dennis reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. What had started as a desperate father's attempt to boost his son's confidence had become something none of them could have imagined. A model for authentic leadership, a program that had touched hundreds of lives, and a legacy that would continue. Long after Lucas and Marcus had moved on to their next adventures, they were no longer the Carter boys who had been expected to fail. They weren't the manufactured success stories that talent agents had wanted to create. They had become something rarer and more valuable. Young leaders who understood that the most powerful voices aren't the ones that demand attention, but the ones that inspire others to find their own strength. And perhaps most importantly, they had learned that sometimes the most beautiful music isn't performed on stages for applause. It's lived out in daily choices to use whatever gifts you have in service of something bigger than yourself. The talent show that had started it all was now just a memory, but its impact would ripple forward for generations through the lives of students who had learned that their voices mattered, their stories had value, and their choices could change the world. 5 years later, Dennis Carter received a letter that made him cry for the first time since Sarah's funeral. It was from a young woman named Maria, a first-generation college student who had been part of the music advocacy program during its second year of operation. Dear Mr. Carter, the letter began, you probably don't remember me, but your sons changed my life. I was the quiet girl in the back row who never thought anyone would want to hear what I had to say. Lucas and Marcus taught me that my voice mattered, even when it shook with nervousness. Today, I graduated from law school, and next month I start work as a public defender. I spend my days advocating for people who don't have voices in the system, and every time I stand up in court, I remember what Marcus told me. Speak from your heart about something you really care about, and people can tell the difference. The letter was one of dozens that had arrived over the years from students whose lives had been touched by the program. Teachers who had been inspired to create similar initiatives in their own schools. Parents who had learned to value authenticity over achievement in their children's lives. Community members who had discovered that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they chose courage over comfort. Lucas was now a middle school teacher in an underserved district, using music and advocacy training to help students find their voices and build confidence. Marcus had become a social worker, specializing in grief counseling for families, helping others navigate the kind of loss that had once threatened to silence him forever. The music advocacy program continued to thrive under Mrs. Phillips's leadership, now serving as a model for districts across the country. The simple idea that students could learn to use their authentic voices to create positive change had sparked a movement that reached far beyond the walls of Riverside Middle School. And Dennis? He still lived in the same small apartment, still worked with his hands, still drove the same old Honda Civic. But now he knew something that had taken him years to understand, that the most valuable inheritance he could leave his sons wasn't money or fame or opportunities. It was the knowledge that their voices mattered. Their choices had consequences, and their authenticity was more powerful than any performance could ever be. Sometimes, late at night when the apartment was quiet, Dennis would hear the boys' voices drifting from their old room. Not the boys, themselves, who now lived hours away pursuing their own callings, but the memory of their harmonies, the echo of their mother's lullabies, and the proof that love really is the strongest thing we can grow. The Carter boys had never become famous. They had become something better. They had become themselves. And in a world that constantly tried to turn people into products, that was the most radical and beautiful success of all. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.